The reality of the Gospel World Outreach Ministries presents the Voice of Deliverance broadcast, featuring the explosive preaching, bold teaching, and the powerful prayer of deliverance of Heaven's Ambassador, Leonard Ford. Brother Ford is a minister that does what others don't, and he has a ministry that goes where others won't. He and his wife, Jessie, travel across America and around the world, preaching hope and bringing deliverance. Whether they are in the church, under the gospel tent, or on the mission field, they boldly declare that if you continue in the word, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Now I present to you Brother
Praise
Ford.
the Lord, BTN viewers. Listen, this is Prophet Leonard Ford, and I have a special guest for you on this week. What I'm going to do, I'm going to let him have the whole program. He's just going to talk to you, tell you his story, let you know what's going on. He's out of Pine Bluff, Arkansas. A few years ago, he was one of my students in the Bible school, and after graduation, he went straight and started a church, and he's been flowing ever since. He may want to tell you how old he is, he may not, but I want you to know this. He got started where most folk want to quit at. And I want him to be here to let you know it's not too late. If there's a real call in your life, if there's a real call in your heart, then it ain't too late for you to rise up. Doesn't matter what your background is, because God's not concerned about your past. He's got a plan for you with an expected end for your future. So Pastor Thurland McKissick is going to come and he's going to minister to you, and I want you to give him your undivided attention. So God bless you. Now remember, he's going to take the whole program, so focus on the things he has to say. God bless you. Hear ye, Pastor Thurland McKissick. God bless you, Brother McKissick.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Ford. I'm the pastor of the New Fellowship Baptist Church in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, which is located at 3706 South Cherry Street. And my wife, Helen McKissick. I would like to say this, that we have been together we celebrated our 55th anniversary last week. But the emphasis here today, I want it to be on God and what he can do if you will only obey him. Back in I will talk about a journey which began back in 1984. I was working for the state of Arkansas for the Arkansas Rehabilitation Services as an administrator, and one day in my office, I prayed a prayer after the state had approved for retirement for 30 years and out. And I prayed to God, and I made a promise to him that if he would allow me to live until I got a chance to retire with 30 years, I told him I would dedicate my life to him, the remaining of my days. Now, I was already in ministry, but I told him I would totally give up everything and just serve him at no cost. And since that time, I have followed the promise that I made in 1995, December 31st. I retired as I promised. And I want you to know that if you promise God something, you need to do it. And I did it, and God blessed me. I retired December 31st, and then I turned around and started seeking something that I could do as a ministry. And I heard of a bailiff job in the juvenile court being available, and I went down and talked with Judge Thomas Brown. And when I talked with him, he hired me to do that job and told me he needed someone on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. And I told him that I would not charge the county anything to do that. I just wanted to give that service to God. And he accepted me, couldn't believe I was going to work for nothing, and he fixed it where I could make $700 a month. And I worked for $700 a month for a year. But he was giving me that, but I didn't ask for it. And from that point, I worked for him, and he increased my salary automatically to $1,500 later because I was even giving him all day Thursday working with juvenile court and the child support. So I'm just saying, it's so important it's okay to make a promise to God, but you need to keep your promises like God keeps his promises with us. And I decided to uh, do that, and I did it for 6 years. The state called me back, talked to me about coming back to work, and I decided to apply to see if I could get the position, and I was awarded a position, and I worked in that position. It was 5 years with a $5 million grant, and I worked it, and actually it ended up working 6 years. Now I'm saying this to say this: God, like He added more to everything that I was doing. So in 2005, uh, I woke up one Saturday morning, and God called me and spoke to me and said, "I want you to preach the gospel." Now I didn't preach until 2005 that way. I'd been preaching all the time, I'm sure, but He said, "I want you to preach the gospel." And I got up and I went to the church, saw my pastor. He was in the office. And he said, "If that's what he told you," he said, "I'll let you do it. I'll give you a time to preach." He gave me a time to preach. I preached, and I preached my first sermon on in May of 2005. And my title was, "It's a Mind Thing." And I preached that sermon, and I used two passages of scripture. Uh, I used Romans 12, 1 and 2, and I also use Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And today, I live by those scriptures today. And I did that, and I want to move with this because I know that's a while back, but I was walking, after I did that, I was walking on the treadmill after I preached my first sermon one morning, and at about 6 o'clock, and God spoke to me and said, I saw an advertisement on TV about going to Agape College. And he spoke to me like I'm speaking to you. He said, "Go there." And that's all he said. Man, after I got up, I waited till 8:30, 9 o'clock, called them, and they told me, "Go online and get you an application, fill it out." I filled it out, and within a week, they said, "We got a program starting in June." He said, "You can get in that class." They accepted me in that class when I turned in my application. And I went there for 2 years. And after going there, while going there, I really felt like although I'd been in church all my life, the revelation of knowledge that was being given to me for the past 2 years was just powerful in my life. And I decided that what I would do is to complete this, and I completed that program and received my biblical diploma in 2007. And then God said, He said, "Look, I want you to plant a church in 2008. And that's when I really started to put on my brakes. Now, He's been speaking to me all the time, and He's been following through. But I said, "Wait a minute." And I didn't. It was September passed. I wrote a letter to my church in September, and I was going to turn it in for me and my wife to let them know what we had been called to do. But I just couldn't, like I couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I said I wouldn't. And I laid around with that, but I refused to let the year go out without following God's plan. And on December 27th, 2007, I went to fill out an incorporation paper, went to the state office and turned it in. Well, God had told me also earlier, He said, "Name the church the New Fellowship Baptist Church." Well, I did not do that. I told my wife, "It's nothing new." I said, no. I said, "Let's name it the Fellowship Baptist." And when I went in and put Fellowship Baptist on it and turned it in, they told me, said, "Well, we can't name it that because there are other churches in the area with the similar name." He said, "You can't do it." So if you could just put one word in front of New Fellowship, he said, we could see if it'll work. So I told her to put new because, see, that's what God had told me in the first place. And I did it. They came back in 15 minutes and gave me the incorporation papers and certificate that day on December the 27th, 2007. Boy, and I'm seeing God work now. So then we decided, I told her we got to turn in our letter to the church. So the first Sunday in January 2008, we turned in our letter to the church, and we stood up and read it before the church and let them know that we had to go and do what God had called us to do. And I told them I didn't want anybody to follow me. God told me to go, and my wife. And that's what we did. And New Fellowship Baptist Church was placed on file then in January, but we couldn't have worship because they wouldn't allow us to do it because the city had to approve the building you were in. We were in a storefront, and we had this storefront on at 801 East of West 6th Street, and we worshiped there for 1 year. And one day before, I was standing in the window, looking out in the window, and a strong power from God showed me that something was out there for us in Pine Bluff. And I told my wife, I went back and told her, I tell my wife everything because, you know what, people think you're crazy sometimes when you tell them some stuff. But my wife don't, if she think I'm crazy, she don't never tell me. And I told her what I had felt. I said, but I don't know what it is. But I said, something is out there for us in South Pine Bluff. From that point on, about a month later or so, Pastor Taylor from Emmanuel Baptist Church, after one of our executive board meetings, he approached me and said, would you go to lunch with me? I said, sure. So we went to a Mexican food restaurant, and we had dinner, lunch, and he said, can I go over and look at your building? I told him, yeah, come on over. He came over. He said, will you go look at mine? I said, yeah. So I went over to Emmanuel Baptist Church with him and looked at their facility that they originally had as their sanctuary. And they were still on the other side, and the buildings were attached. And he said, well, our church has already voted for you all to come in and to utilize that building if you all will. So that Sunday, I got my church together. I announced it. We went over Sunday afternoon, looked at the building. We all gathered around the altar because we wanted to move out of a storefront into, I guess, a traditional church. And I don't know whether that was the right thing or not, but we did. And God, after prayer, we had prayer around the altar in that empty building. And they agreed right there, said, let's come. And we were there for 8.5 years. And we worshiped there in that building, and we could utilize their facilities. I mean, they were great. I mean, we could do whatever we want to. We were paying rent, but we were paying rent where we were too, you know. So it worked out real good. And I'm saying all of this to say how God has a plan if you will obey. He said, if you obey me, he said, obey me in my commands if you love me. Do you love me? He said, obey me in my commands. So I made promises and God made promises. God made promises to Abraham. And he stood with his promise because Abraham was faithful. And it's for us to be faithful in whatever he's doing. So I have really strived in the latter part of my life to be faithful as I can and to trust God for everything. So after planting this church, I stood one morning and I was broken. I was tired because of when you go out in the world and you start bringing people in that are unchurched and those that have been in church but out of church, that's a task. It's a job. But with God, all things are possible. And I believe that. But I got to one of my moments where I was weak one Sunday morning as we got ready to worship. And I was really ready to quit because it was just overwhelming. But God spoke to me when I was about to quit, about the things that he called me to do, to go and seek the lost, that people may be saved. And I stood there in the church and cried, I'm about to cry now, because it's still rough. But he told me then, he said, I love them too. And that broke my heart, because I was not showing the kind of love that he showed for me when I was just like they are and when I was doing things. So from that point on, he said, but he said, I will take care of you. From that point on, I have kept the faith, and I keep pushing, pressing toward the mark of the calling that he has on my life. And I'm doing it with patience, with love, and much compassion. Nobody is too much of a sinner for me to share the gospel and the good news about Jesus Christ, because when I was a sinner, he gave his life for me, not after I started trying to do better, but he gave his life and died for me while I was a sinner. And that's what my call is today, to do for others. And that's what I'm doing. And I have had so many situations, and I can't tell the whole story. I'm just telling you parts of the story. But what I do want you to get is, no matter what your age is, I was 63 years old when he called me to preach. And I did not hesitate to preach. But then I did hesitate some ways down the road when some things he was telling you to do. But now I've learned to just trust him and do whatever he tells you to do. So in this church where we were a couple of years ago, he told me, he said, look, you all started you a building fund. So I went to my elders. I said, hey, look, I'm going to mention to the church, we need to start a building fund. The people we have, low income, don't put no money in church. They come, and a lot of times they receiving more than they giving, because we giving to them, and they come when they giving, and sometimes they don't leave anything sometimes. But I have such a loving group. They are loving, and as they are becoming disciples, I'm seeing the fruit of the labor that we are doing in the people that we have in our church. And what I did, we started the building fund, and we were thinking, we were having such difficulty with the two churches being tied together, and both of them being Southern Baptist churches. It really made it difficult, because people looking at us want to know, why y'all got two churches here? One majority Anglo, the other one African American, but y'all right here, and we couldn't come together, look like. And I'm not so sure God was just totally pleased with, but he knew we were tired and it was a struggle. So what we did was, we began to raise money, put little funds we could get. I told him, I said, if you could give a nickel, if God can take two fish and 5 loaves of bread and feed 5,000 people, he can help us get a church. I knew it wasn't impossible for God, because it said nothing is impossible for him. So what we did was, we did that for 2.5 years. And during that time, we began to look at church buildings that were vacant, and we would get turned down because they wanted more money than we could pay for them. And we were looking for property that we could get, and the city didn't want to sell us, didn't want to honor the bid that we had with them. So we went to the school district. They had some property. We were going to get that property, and they agreed to sell us the property. But then they were talking about they needed, they couldn't find a deed or something. It was always something. But see, what I didn't know is what God's plan was. See, God's plan wasn't for us to buy a church. God's plan wasn't for us to build a church. God's plan was for us to obey him and do what he called us to do. He told us to go and to preach the gospel and teach all nations, to observe all the things that he had taught us. He told us that when he told the disciples. So we were doing that, and then we were trying to get our own place of worship so that we would be free to not have to ask to do everything. Want to have this, you got to go use the sign. You got to go ask, can you use the sign? So I told him, I said, I know God would do for us what we need done. And God answered our prayer much better than I could have ever thought of it. We couldn't buy property. We couldn't find a piece of property. We decided to ask the church if they would merge with us. The Southside Baptist Church also contacted us about merging with them, but then they didn't. We didn't have as much to put on the table because we were just a group of people that just loved the Lord, but didn't have a lot of resources. But what happened? Guess what happened? When we started trying to merge, in the same area of town where I saw this vision and didn't understand what it was, the same area of town, I got a call from our missionary, Mike Manning, and he said, Brother Danny, that's what he called me. He said, would you all accept a church building if they would give it to you? I said, yeah. I didn't have to have no question about that. I didn't even care where it was. I mean, I was hoping it was in Pine Bluff, and it was. But I told him yes, so he went on, and he came back a day later. He said, look, they want to meet with you. And he said the officers and members of Forest Park Baptist Church want to meet with y'all about giving you this property. Man, that's a church right down there in the area where he had shown me that he had something for us. And we went to one meeting. And we talked. They were ready to give it to us in the first meeting, but we just knew we had some things to work out. Then we went to another meeting. And the third meeting that we had, we signed the deeds. They signed the deeds over to us with a property. And to tell you how God is, and see, I know at my age, see, I'm only wanting to play my role in what he wants done. I'm not looking to do the whole thing and receive glory for any of it. I just want to do my part like I told him I would do. He promised me things, and he has done it. I wanted to do what I can to hold up my end of the bargain. I said I would work with him, I would do work for him, and I would not charge him anything if he let me make it there. I have not charged a salary at the church since it's been going. I've been pastoring. This is my 10th year on May of this year. They insisted that I get a little house, down the road, but I had told the Lord I would do it for nothing. And he has blessed me even not doing that. Me and my wife, we are totally debt-free because of God. And I'm telling you this, not trying to tell you my business. What I'm trying to tell you is no matter how old you are, it does not matter. Abraham and Sarah were able to have a child at 100 years old. Surely you can witness and do things. I fell and hurt myself back in 2012 after the dog attacked me, and it causes me problems with my knees. Perfect health, no blood pressure issues or none of those, but my knees and my back caused me problems to get around. But you know what? Jacob wrestled with an angel. Did he ever walk straight? I'm not sure about that. They say he went limping. I can limp, but I'm limping on and doing the call that God had placed on my life. And I'm just so grateful that he has done that. I can't tell the whole story today, but I can tell you this. No matter what your age or whatever your circumstances, if you trust God and obey, he would do things that you cannot even imagine or measure the things that he can do in your life. Our church is doing well. We have property. They gave us not only a church building with all the they gave us all the property they had. 2 brick houses and an acre of land behind for future use. He has done for us things that and we don't owe nobody nothing. We had a beautiful time last night when our singles and our marriage ministry came together for the first time for a Valentine's. And I tell you, we had a wonderful celebration last night. And we are doing things to try to help people to realize that, you know, God has a plan, which was his creative purpose for all creation when he created us. It's a divine creative purpose is what I call it. He has one of those for everybody, no matter who you are. If you will only be attentive and listen to his voice, God will not only he will take care of you, but he will lead you to heights that you could never anticipate or dream of. And we don't have to wait till we get to heaven to experience this. Eternal life begins when you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. And we work out our salvation as we go along, even to heaven where we will receive, be in a place where we won't have no more sickness and sorrow and all those things. But we have to trust God, obey him, and do the things that he called us to do. Now, what I want to do, I want to read something for you, because I would like to just read our vision and our mission statement for the church, because it's not all about property and things like this. But what I'm trying to tell you is that God, as he says in Philippians 4:19, he said he will supply all of your needs according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. And if we just keep in mind, as Paul said in the verse 13, that you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. And if you will remember in Proverbs 3:5-6, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight or direct your path. Let me, as I close, have you to understand we are located at this New Fellowship Baptist Church at 3706 South Cherry Street, Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And we welcome you to come and worship with us. We have all kinds of ministries going in every area. And we have church at 9 o'clock a.m., Sunday school at 10:30, and we have youth church at 9:45. Thank you very much.
You have been encouraged through the uncompromising message that you heard today.